I truly do not understand what you expect from me.
Yesterday morning, my son Travis called me, his voice cracking with visible panic. "Mom, why are all the cards declined? My mother-in-law and I could not even pay for lunch at the restaurant. People are laughing at us." His desperation filled me with a kind of satisfaction I never thought I would feel toward my own child. Before we go on, do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We bring you new stories every single day. Hit like and let us know what city you are watching from in the comments. But to understand why I reached this breaking point, I have to tell you what happened the evening before when my daughter-in-law Marla decided to humiliate me in front of the entire family. I am 68 years old, and for the last few years, ever since I was widowed, I have become nothing more than the personal ATM for my son and his wife. Every whim, every craving, every unnecessary expense came directly from my savings. But yesterday, while I was serving coffee in my own home, Marla turned to her friends who had come to visit and let slip the words that would change everything forever. "That old woman is only good for paying our bills." My son Travis, instead of defending me, burst out laughing as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the entire world. I stood there, coffee pot in hand, watching them mock me in my own living room. My hands trembled, but not from sadness, no. They trembled with a cold rage I had never felt before. Because in that moment, I understood something I had been denying for years. To them, I was not a mother. I was not a mother-in-law. I was not even a real person. I was just a bank account with legs. For 10 long years, I had been their financial salvation. When Travis lost his job, I paid his rent for 8 months, $800 every month that came out of my pension, without him lifting a single finger to look for honest work. When Marla decided she needed to refresh her entire wardrobe because she wanted to look professional, it was $3,000 charged on my credit card. When they wanted to go on vacation to Hawaii because they claimed they deserved it, after so much stress, another $5,000 disappeared from my savings. They never once invited me on those vacations. Of course, I was good enough to pay, but not to accompany them. "It is a romantic trip, Mom," Travis would say whenever I hinted that I would like to see the ocean. "You understand, right?" And I, like the fool I had been for years, always understood, always paid, always kept quiet while they lived the life I financed. The last straw came 3 months ago when Marla decided she needed a brand new car. "The one we have is getting too old, Evelina," she told me in that syrupy voice she always used when she wanted something expensive. "Besides, if we are going to have kids soon, we need something safer." A $15,000 down payment. $15,000 that represented 2 full years of my savings. But I paid it, as always, because I told myself it was for the good of the family. But yesterday, after hearing those venomous words, after seeing my own son laugh at me, something deep in my heart changed forever. That night I could not sleep, not from sadness, but from a clarity that burned inside me. I got up at 3 a.m, turned on my computer, and began making the decisions I should have made years ago. First, I canceled all the additional cards they had in my name, every single one of the 5 cards they had been using as if they were their own. Then I closed the shared savings account where I deposited money every month for emergencies that were never real emergencies, but rather expensive restaurant bills and designer clothes. I also changed every single password to my bank accounts and removed their names from my automatic transfers. At 6 a.m, when I was finally done, I poured myself a coffee and sat down in my favorite armchair. For the very first time in years, I felt at peace. I knew that soon my phone would ring, and on the other end would be my desperate, humiliated son demanding an explanation, and I would be ready to give him one. The phone rang at exactly 9:15 in the morning. I was sitting in my kitchen, enjoying my second coffee of the day, when I saw Travis's name on the screen. I did not answer immediately. I let it ring 3 more times while I savored a moment of power I had not felt in decades. When I finally picked up, his voice was desperate, almost hysterical. "Mom, why are all the cards declined? I am here at the Crestview Grill with Marla's mother. We wanted to have lunch and celebrate her birthday, but none of the cards work. It is humiliating. People are staring at us. The waiter is getting impatient, and I do not have enough cash to pay a $200 bill. What is going on?" The irony was delicious. They had chosen the Crestview Grill, the most expensive restaurant in town, to impress Regina, the very same place I was never invited to, despite having paid for family dinners there for years when they went without me. Now they were there, surrounded by the high society they so desperately wanted to impress, and they could not even pay for a single dish. "Good morning, Travis," I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. "The cards are canceled because I have decided I am no longer going to finance your lifestyle." "What are you, crazy?" "We are in public. Marla's mother is here. How am I supposed to explain that my own mother left me high and dry? This is ridiculous." "What is ridiculous, son, was hearing you laugh yesterday when your wife said I was only good for paying your bills. What is truly ridiculous is realizing that for 10 long years I have been treated like an ATM instead of your mother." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear voices in the background, probably Marla and her mother Regina, both wondering in confusion what exactly was happening. The waiter must have been waiting impatiently for the payment, and other diners were likely starting to notice the awkward, embarrassing situation. "Mom, please do not do this now. We can talk later, but I need you to reactivate the cards, just for today, I promise." I cut him off without hesitation. "No more promises, Travis. No more excuses. Just for today. For 10 entire years, I have heard the same promises. For 10 years, I have been your easy solution for everything. But yesterday, I finally learned something important. Hey, you do not respect me. You do not value me. And you definitely do not love me the way I loved you." "That is not true. Of course we love you. Marla was just joking. You know how she is." "I know exactly how she is, Travis. And I know exactly how you are. That is precisely why I made this decision." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. I imagined the situation at the restaurant was growing more tense with each passing minute. His mother-in-law had probably already noticed something was terribly wrong, that the gold card he always used to impress others was not working anymore. "Mom, please, we cannot just stand here. What do you want us to do? Wash dishes? Should we call the police? This is such a humiliation." "Now you know how I felt for years," I replied firmly. "The difference is that you are 35 years old and should be perfectly able to solve your own problems. Are you sick? Are you feeling okay? This is not like you, Mom. You have never been this cruel." Cruel. That word hit me like a slap across the face. I am cruel after years of sacrificing, of depriving myself of things I needed, after working until I was 65 to ensure you would have a decent inheritance, after being left alone every Christmas while you traveled with my gifts of money. Cruel was laughing at me yesterday, I said, with a coldness I did not know I even possessed. Cruel was treating me as if I was invisible for years, except when you needed money. Cruel was making me feel that my only value as a mother and as a person was my bank account. Mom, Marla did not mean it like that. Marla said exactly what she thought, and you agreed with her. You both made it very clear what my place is in your lives. I heard louder voices in the background, Marla asking angrily what was going on, her mother Regina making comments I could not quite distinguish, but that sounded more and more annoyed. The waiter had probably already brought the check and was waiting with that forced patience they always use when they know there is a problem at a table. Look, Mom, I get that you are upset, but this is not the way to handle it. We can sit down and talk like adults, but right now I need you to help me. Just this one more time, and then we can change things. Just this one more time. I laughed, and my own laughter sounded strange, bitter, almost foreign to me. Do you know how many times I have heard that phrase? Do you know how many last times I have financed over the past 10 years? But Mom, no Travis. Not this time. This time, you are going to have to find another solution. You have jobs, you have friends, you have in-laws. Figure it out. How are we going to explain to Marla's mother that my own mom abandoned us in a restaurant? How am I going to face the people who know us? Everyone is going to be talking about this. And there it was, the naked truth. He was not worried about fixing our relationship. He was not reflecting on how they had treated me all these years. He only cared about his image, his reputation, what people around him would think, just like always. That is your problem to solve, son. For years, I worried endlessly about your image, your comfort, your happiness. Now it is finally time for me to worry about mine. You cannot do this. You are my mother. Exactly. I am your mother, not your employee. I am your mother, not your personal bank. I am your mother, not your financial lifeline. And as your mother, I should have taught you years ago how to stand firmly on your own 2 feet. There was another longer silence. This time, I could feel his desperation through the phone line. He was probably doing frantic mental calculations, thinking about who he could call, how he could possibly get out of this situation without completely losing face. Mom, please. Marla is crying. Her mother, Regina, is asking what kind of family we even are. The waiter has already asked us 3 times if everything is okay. Please have mercy. Mercy, another word that made me tremble with rage. Where was their mercy when I stayed up late night after night, calculating how to pay their expenses on top of my own? Where was their compassion when I deprived myself of buying new clothes so I could give them money for their endless whims? Mercy is earned over years, Travis, and you two lost it yesterday. I hung up the phone. My hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear or sadness. They were trembling with adrenaline, with a sense of power I had not experienced in decades. For the very first time in years, I had put my own needs first. For the very first time in years, I had said no. For the next 30 minutes, the phone did not stop ringing. First, it was Travis again, then Marla, then a number I did not recognize, which I assumed belonged to Regina. Every call I rejected gave me more strength, more conviction that I was finally doing the right thing. I poured myself another coffee and sat on my patio, enjoying the silence I had missed so much. But the calm did not last long. At 11 o'clock in the morning, I heard the unmistakable sound of Travis's car pulling into my driveway, the car I had helped pay for, of course. 2 doors slammed shut, and I heard hurried footsteps heading straight toward my front door. The knocking started immediately, loud and insistent. Mom, open the door. We need to talk. Travis's voice sounded different now, more desperate, but also sharper, more aggressive. I know you are in there. Your car is in the driveway. I did not move. I remained seated on my back patio, invisible from the front entrance, watching the birds visit the feeder I had installed last year. It was funny how the small pleasures in life took on new meaning when you finally had the peace of mind to enjoy them. Evelina. Now it was Marla's voice, sharp and demanding. We know you are there. Stop acting like a child and come out and face us. Face them as if I were the one who had done something wrong, as if I were the one who owed an explanation after years of financial and emotional abuse. The irony was so absurd, it almost made me laugh out loud. The knocking intensified. I could hear they were using their feet now, not just their fists. My front door, the oak door my late husband had installed with such care, was being pounded on as if it were the entrance to some seedy bar. This is ridiculous, Marla shouted. You made us look like beggars in front of everyone. Travis's mother-in-law had to pay for our lunch. A 70-year-old woman had to take money out of her purse because her daughter-in-law is a lunatic. Ah, so that was what happened. Regina had to rescue them. I pictured the scene, Travis sweating bullets as he tried to explain why none of his cards were working, Marla making up pathetic excuses, and finally the older woman being forced to save the day. The humiliation must have been exquisite. Mom, please. Travis sounded on the verge of tears now. People are already talking. Everyone at the restaurant was staring at us. Some even took out their phones. This is going to be all over social media. Social media, of course. That was their biggest concern. Not the fact that they had hurt their mother. Not the recognition that they had crossed a line. They only cared about their public image, their reputation in those social circles where they loved to constantly show off the lifestyle I had financed with my own sacrifices. The knocking stopped for a brief moment, but I could clearly hear their voices arguing in furious whispers. They were probably deciding on their next strategy. I knew Marla well enough to know she had a full arsenal of emotional manipulations ready, and Travis had learned them well from her over the years. Evelina. Marla's voice changed tone completely. Now it sounded soft, almost sweet, as if butter would not melt in her mouth. I know you are upset, and you have every right to be. Maybe what I said yesterday sounded bad, but you know I did not mean it like that. I was just joking with my friends. You know how we women are when we get together. Sometimes we say things without thinking. It was fascinating to hear how she could change her personality in mere seconds. From the furious woman who had been screaming and kicking at my door, she had now transformed into the understanding daughter-in-law who claimed she had only made a small communication error. Mom. Now it was Travis who had also adopted the gentle tone. I understand we hurt you. Marla explained to me what happened yesterday, and you are right to be upset, but declining the cards does not solve anything. It just makes things worse for everyone. For everyone. Not for me, of course. For them. For their comfort, for their lifestyle. My emotional well-being was still not part of the equation. Please, Mom, we can fix this. We can change things. Travis's voice broke slightly. But I need you to reactivate the cards today. I have bills due. The car insurance is due tomorrow, and Marla has doctor's appointments this week. We cannot just be left without money out of the blue. Without money, as if it were their money, as if I were somehow responsible for their insurance, their medical appointments, their endless expenses, as supposedly independent adults. In that moment, I understood with crystal clarity that they truly did not even see the difference between my money and theirs. In their minds, my savings were a family resource, not the result of decades of exhausting work and sacrifice from a woman who had already paid her dues in life. Evelina, please think about what you are doing. Marla had switched strategies again. Now her voice sounded concerned, almost motherly. What will people think if they find out you cut off your own son? What will they say at church? What will the family think? The church, the family. It was always the same with her, using my reputation, my relationships, my image as emotional leverage, as if my worth as a person depended only on what others thought, as if my dignity was less important than the opinion of people who probably did not even know how they treated me in the privacy of my own home. Look, Mom. Travis had now adopted a more serious, more adult tone. I understand you want us to change some things. We can talk about boundaries, about how to better manage the family finances, but this is not the way. This is emotional manipulation. Emotional manipulation. The words echoed in my head like a slap. I was being emotionally manipulative. After years of subtle blackmail, of being made to feel guilty, every single time I hesitated to give them money, of them shamelessly using my motherly love to empty my bank account. The projection was so obvious, it almost made me laugh. The knocking started again, but now it was more spaced out, less aggressive. They were realizing that the brute force strategy was not working. I could hear them move away from the front door, probably circling around the house to see if they could spot me through a window. Evelina, Marla yelled from what sounded like my side window. We saw your shadow. We know you are in there. Stop hiding like a coward. Coward. There was the real Marla again, the one who always emerged when her sweet manipulations failed completely, the same woman who had called me that old woman the day before, who had shamelessly turned my generosity into a reason for cruel mockery, who had trained my son to see me as a resource instead of as a person. I got up from my chair and walked slowly, almost ceremoniously, to the window from where she had shouted. I pulled back the curtain just enough for her to see me, and our eyes locked firmly through the glass. Her expression immediately changed from fury to relief, and then to that fake smile I knew far too well. There you are, she exclaimed as if she had just found a lost child. Come on, let us open the door and talk like a family. I looked her directly in the eyes for a long, steady moment, feeling a strange calm flowing through me. Then very slowly, I closed the curtain again. I heard her shriek of frustration, followed by more pounding on the window, but this time I did not even flinch. Have you ever been in a moment where saying no felt like both the hardest and most powerful choice of your life? Share your feelings and experiences in the comments. Drop a simple number 1 if you relate. I went back to my patio and sat down once more. The phone immediately started ringing, but I silenced it without hesitation. For the first time in so many years, my home was truly my own again. The shouting and banging continued for another full hour, but they gradually lost intensity. From my back patio, I could hear fragments of their frustrated conversations, their desperate plans to make me change my mind. Marla suggested calling a locksmith to force the door open, but Travis reminded her that would be breaking and entering. Even in their desperation, they did not want to risk real legal trouble. Finally, I heard the car doors slam shut and the engine drive away, but I knew deep down this was far from over. I knew Marla well enough to know she was already planning her next move, probably something more elaborate, more emotional. I was not wrong. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone started ringing with unknown numbers. First, it was Regina, her voice polite but firm. Evelina, dear, I think there has been a misunderstanding. Marla told me what happened, and I am sure we can resolve this like civilized adults. I hung up without answering. Then it was my sister Norma, who lives in another state, and had obviously received a heavily edited version of the events. Evelina Travis called me very worried. He says you are acting strangely and that you left them stranded at a restaurant. Are you okay? Are you feeling sick? I am perfectly fine, Norma, I replied. Better than ever, in fact. But I do not understand. Travis says you canceled all their cards without any warning. That does not sound like the Evelina I know. You have always been so generous with your family. Maybe that was the problem, I said. Maybe I was too generous for far too long. But Evelina, they are your family. Marla says you are punishing them for an innocent joke. Surely you can sit down and talk this out. An innocent joke. It was impressive how Marla had managed to rewrite history in just a few hours. What had been a cruel humiliation in front of guests had now become an innocent joke that I had supposedly misinterpreted because I was too sensitive. Norma, have you ever felt like an ATM for your kids? I asked directly. What? No. Why do you ask? Because that is exactly what I am to Travis and Marla. And yesterday, I finally realized it. Evelina, you are exaggerating. Parents always help their children. It is normal. Is it normal to pay your adult son's rent for years? Is it normal to finance their vacations while you stay home alone? Is it normal for them to make fun of you for being generous? Norma was quiet for a moment. Well, maybe they have taken advantage of your generosity a bit, but cutting everything off at once seems very drastic. You know what is drastic, Norma, working until you are 65 to secure a decent inheritance for your son, only to find out he is already spending it while you are still alive. After that conversation, I decided to unplug the house phone. I put my cell phone on airplane mode. I needed silence to process everything I was feeling, to plan my next steps carefully. That evening, as I prepared dinner for myself for the first time in months, without the anxiety of waiting for calls asking for money, I realized something important. I did not feel guilty. My whole life I had been trained to feel guilty when I did not meet the needs of others, especially my family. But this time, that familiar guilt was not there. Instead, I felt something I had not experienced in years, mental clarity. It was as if I had been living in an emotional fog and could finally see everything clearly. Every decision I had made in the last 10 years flashed through my mind like a movie, and I could now see patterns I had not wanted to acknowledge before. The cycle was always the same. Travis or Marla would approach me with a temporary financial problem. I would initially resist. They would apply emotional pressure. It is just this once. We are desperate. What will people think? I would give in. They would solve their immediate problem. And a few weeks later, a new temporary problem would appear. There was never a real repayment plan, never a genuine acknowledgement of my sacrifice, and definitely never an invitation to share in the benefits of my own generosity. I paid for their vacations, but I was never invited. I financed their dinners at fancy restaurants, but I ate alone at home. I covered their medical expenses, but no one ever asked about my health. It felt like I had become part of one of those endless revenge stories where the villain never realizes they are destroying the very person keeping them alive. I got up and walked to my study where I kept all my financial documents. It was time to do the real math to understand exactly how much I had spent on them over the years. I pulled out my bank statements from the last 5 years and started calculating. The figure was devastating. $86,000. $86,000 in 5 years. That did not even count the previous years when I did not keep such detailed records. It was more than half of my total pension, more than what many people earn in 2 years of work. But the most painful part was not the amount of money. It was realizing that in exchange for those $86,000, I had received mockery, indifference, and the treatment of being seen as an obligation rather than a blessing. As I reviewed the numbers, I found something that made me tremble with rage. They had been using one of my cards for premium streaming services, expensive gym memberships, and magazine subscriptions I did not even know existed. Small monthly charges that added up to hundreds of dollars a year. Money that was automatically coming out of my account to pay for luxuries I never enjoyed. That night, I made another important decision. I took my will out of the file cabinet and read it carefully. I had drafted that document 5 years ago when I still believed I was securing the future of a loving and grateful family. Travis was the sole beneficiary of everything: the house, the savings accounts, the investments, every single asset. But now I saw that will with completely different eyes. Why should I leave my entire estate to someone who had already spent more than half of it while I was still alive? Why reward someone with an inheritance who had treated me like a resource instead of a mother? I decided that the next day I would call my lawyer to schedule an appointment. It was time to make some significant and permanent changes to my estate plans. If Travis wanted to treat me like a bank, then he would have to be content with the interest, not the principal. I went to bed that night with a strange but liberating feeling. For the first time in years, I had made decisions based solely on my own well-being. For the first time in years, I had not stayed awake worrying about the financial problems of other adults. I slept better than I had in months. The next day, I woke up with an energy I had not felt in years. It was Friday, and for the first time in a very long time, I had plans that did not involve solving anyone else's problems. First, I would call my lawyer. Then I would go to the bank to make some additional changes, and maybe I would buy myself something nice with the money I normally would have spent on someone else's whims. I plugged the house phone back in while I made breakfast. As expected, I had 14 messages on the answering machine. I listened to them carefully while I drank my coffee, and each one confirmed more clearly that I had made the right decision. Message 1. Marla with a tearful voice. Evelina, it is Marla. I know you are upset, but please think carefully about what you are doing. Travis did not sleep at all last night. He is so worried about you. He says he has never seen you like this before. Please, call us. Message 2. Travis sounding absolutely desperate. Mom, I need to talk to you. I went to the bank this morning and they told me you closed the account where you deposited money for our emergencies. Why would you do that? That account was for both of us. It was fascinating how he continued to refer to my money as ours. That account had never been for both of us. It was my money that I deposited for their supposed emergencies, which invariably turned out to be vacations, expensive clothes, or restaurants. Message 3, Norma again. Evelina Travis called me again. He says you also closed a savings account. Are you sure about what you are doing? Do you not think you are being a little radical? The following messages followed the same predictable pattern. Feigned concern, questioning my mental health, and pleas, disguised as sisterly advice. But message number 11 caught my attention. It was from a number I did not recognize, but the voice was familiar. Mrs. Marsh, this is Clayton, my cousin Marla's husband. Look, I know we do not know each other well, but Marla asked me to call you. She is very worried because she says you are acting very strangely. As a man, I think sometimes women complicate things more than necessary. Why do you not just forgive and forget? Family is the most important thing. Family is the most important thing. What a convenient philosophy when it comes to maintaining a status quo that benefits only them. I wondered if Clayton would be so willing to forgive and forget if someone made fun of him in front of his family while emptying his bank account at the same time. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called the law firm where I had made my will. The secretary told me that Mr. Gareth had a cancellation and could see me that same afternoon at 2. Perfect. Then I called the bank and requested an appointment with the manager to review all my accounts and make some additional security changes. I also wanted to make absolutely sure that Travis had no access to any information about my finances. As I was getting ready to leave, the doorbell rang. For a moment, I thought it was Travis and Marla again. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw my neighbor Fern standing on the porch. Fern was a 62-year-old woman who had been widowed 2 years ago, and we occasionally chatted over the garden fence. I opened the door with some curiosity. Fern had never formally come to visit me before. "Good morning, Evelina," she said with a warm, genuine smile. "I hope I am not bothering you, but I heard a lot of noise and shouting yesterday, and I wanted to make sure you were okay." I invited her in and served her coffee. It was refreshing to finally have someone in my house who was not there to ask for money or manipulate me emotionally. "Is everything all right?" she asked with genuine concern. "Yesterday, I saw your son and his wife were here for hours shouting and banging on the door. I was about to call the police." I told her the whole story, not the most intimate details, but enough for her to clearly understand the situation. Fern listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding with expressions of sympathy and understanding. "Evelina," she said when I finished, "I have to confess something. For years, I have watched how they treat you when they come to visit. I have seen them arrive in new cars, dressed in expensive clothes, talking on the latest phones. Meanwhile, you are still driving the same car from 10 years ago and shopping at discount stores." Her words hit me hard because they were external confirmation of something I had been denying internally for far too long. Others could clearly see the obvious truth that I had stubbornly refused to acknowledge. "But what has struck me the most," Fern continued, "is that I have never once seen them do anything for you. I have never seen them help you with your groceries, fix something in your house, or simply visit you without it being to ask for something." "Is it that obvious?" I asked, feeling a complicated mix of shame and relief at the same time. "To someone looking from the outside, yes," she replied gently. "But I also understand why you could not see it yourself. When you are a mother, you always want to believe the best of your children." Fern stayed for another hour, and our conversation was the most honest, liberating, and comforting one I had experienced in months. She told me about her own experiences with adult children who expected her to solve all their problems, and how she had learned the importance of setting boundaries after being widowed. "You know what helped me the most," she said before leaving. "Realizing that being a good mother does not mean being a martyr. You can love your children without sacrificing your dignity for them." Her words resonated in my mind all the way to the bank. In the manager's office, we reviewed all my accounts and implemented new strict security measures. I changed every single password, added two-factor authentication, and made absolutely sure that only I had access to any financial information. "Mrs. Marsh," the manager said as he processed the changes, "may I ask why these drastic changes? Do you have any specific security concerns? Let us just say I finally realized that my biggest financial security risk lives inside my own family, I replied. The manager nodded with full understanding. It is more common than you might think, ma'am. We see many cases of older adults being taken advantage of financially by relatives. You did the right thing by protecting yourself. After the bank, I went to lunch by myself at a small, cozy restaurant I had always wanted to try, but had never allowed myself the luxury. I ordered the most expensive dish on the menu, a glass of wine and dessert. The total bill was $45 less than what Travis and Marla spent on a single round of drinks during their nights out. As I savored my lunch, I realized something deeply important. It had been years since I had enjoyed a meal without the constant anxiety of calculating how much it was costing me, how much I might need to set aside for Travis's next emergency, or whether I could truly afford such a small personal pleasure. For the first time in years, I was eating with genuine appetite and real enjoyment. The appointment with Mr. Gareth the lawyer was revealing in ways I had not anticipated. When I explained the situation and my desire to change my will, he showed no surprise at all. In fact, he told me that cases like mine were far more frequent than I had imagined. Mrs. Marsh, he said as he reviewed my current will, I see we drafted this document 5 years ago. At that time, you designated your entire estate to your son Travis. Are you sure you want to make significant changes? Completely sure, I replied firmly. Over these 5 years, I have seen my son's true character. He has shown that he does not value my generosity, and frankly, he has already spent more than half of his inheritance while I am still alive. The lawyer took notes as I detailed the $86,000 I had documented, not counting the previous years. His eyebrows raised slightly when I mentioned the figure. I understand your position, he said thoughtfully. What kind of changes are you considering? I want to divide my estate. A portion for charitable organizations that truly help people in need, not capricious adults. Another portion for my sister Norma, who has always been independent and has never once asked me for anything. And for Travis, I paused deliberately. For Travis, just enough to show that I have not disinherited him out of malice, but not enough for him to continue living without working. Are you thinking of a specific percentage? 50% for charity, 30% for my sister, and 20% for Travis, with the condition that he can only receive his share if he demonstrates a full year of complete financial independence. The lawyer smiled slightly. That last condition is interesting and completely legal. You are essentially incentivizing personal responsibility. I left the law firm feeling a deep satisfaction. For the very first time in years, I had made decisions about my future that reflected my real values, not my fears or my maternal guilt. When I got home, there was an unfamiliar car parked in my driveway. An older woman, elegantly dressed, was standing on my porch. It was Marla's mother, Regina. "Evelina," she said, with a forced smile when she saw me arrive. "Good you are here. We need to have a woman-to-woman talk." I invited her in, more out of curiosity than politeness. I wanted to hear what version of the events this woman had received. "Look, dear," Regina began, once we were seated, "I know there was a misunderstanding yesterday between you and the kids. Marla told me everything, and frankly, I think you are exaggerating the situation." "Exaggerating?" I asked. "Well, yes. Marla says she made a comment that you misinterpreted, and now you have taken very drastic measures, canceling your own son's credit cards. That seems like a very extreme reaction for a simple joke between women." a simple joke between women. It was impressive how the narrative had already evolved. Now it was not just an innocent joke, but it was also supposedly my fault for not having a sense of humor. "Regina," I said calmly, "do you give your daughter unlimited credit cards?" "No." "But do you pay your adult daughter's rent?" "No." "But that is different." "Do you finance your daughter's vacations while you stay home alone?" Regina shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Evelina, every family handles their finances differently." "Exactly. And I have decided to handle mine differently from now on." "But think about Marla and Travis. They are young. They are building their future. They need support." "They are 35 and 32, respectively. At that age, I had already raised a son, worked for years, and saved for my old age without help from my parents. Times were different then. Times are different now, that is true, but there are also more opportunities, better education, and more access to bank loans. There is no reason why two educated adults cannot support themselves." Regina changed her strategy. "Evelina Marla is very upset. She cried all night yesterday. She says she has always seen you as a second mother and does not understand why you are suddenly rejecting her. A second mother who is only good for paying bills according to her own words. That was a joke. Women always complain about their mothers-in-law. It is normal. Complaining in private is one thing, Regina. Humiliating someone in front of guests is something else entirely." The conversation continued for another half hour, with Regina using every manipulation tactic in the book. Guilt. Think about how your son feels. Fear. You are going to end up alone. Shame. What will people think? And even veiled threats. Marla has contacts in social services. It felt surreal, almost like living through a revenge true story, where every manipulation trick was laid bare before my eyes. Finally, when she realized that none of her tactics were working, she switched to a more direct approach. "Evelina, I am going to be frank with you. Marla and Travis are considering seeking legal help. There are ways to declare a person mentally incompetent if they show erratic behavior with their finances." There it was, the real threat, hiding behind all the emotional manipulation. If I did not give in voluntarily, they would attempt to take away control of my own finances by force. "Regina," I said, standing up firmly, "I suggest you consult with a good lawyer before even trying that. I just came from an appointment with mine, and he assured me that a person who protects their finances from family abuse is demonstrating mental competence, not the opposite." Her expression changed immediately. She realized she had shown her cards too soon. "I did not mean—" She began to backtrack. "Yes, you meant exactly that," I interrupted sharply. "And now that I know what your true intentions are, I think this conversation is officially over." I walked her to the door in silence. Before she left, she turned and said, "Evelina, I hope you reconsider. A family war does not benefit anyone." "There is no war, Regina. There is only a woman who has finally learned to value herself." After she left, I sat in my living room and reflected on what I had just heard. Not only were they planning to intensify the emotional manipulation, but they were also seriously considering legal measures to regain control over my money. That evening, I called Mr. Gareth and told him about Regina's threat. He reassured me, explaining that to declare someone mentally incompetent requires solid medical evidence and an extensive legal process. Acting responsibly with one's personal finances does not qualify as evidence of incompetence. However, he warned me, "I recommend you document everything, record conversations if possible, keep written records of their threats, and consider getting a preventative psychological evaluation to have undeniable evidence of your mental competence. That night, for the first time since all this began, I felt a small but real spark of fear. But it was not fear of doing something wrong. It was fear of how far they might be willing to go to regain control over my money. Yet I also felt something stronger than fear determination. Regina's threat kept me awake that night, but not from terror. It was from a cold rage that grew sharper with every passing hour. How dare they even consider declaring me mentally incompetent for protecting my own money? It was the ultimate manipulation. If you cannot get what you want through persuasion, then try to strip the person of their legal right to decide about their own life. The next day, Saturday, I followed Mr. Gareth's advice. First, I went to a private clinic where I underwent a complete psychological evaluation. The doctor, a professional woman in her 50s, listened as I explained the situation. "Mrs. Marsh," she said, after 2 hours of tests and interviews, "let me be perfectly clear. You are demonstrating exceptional mental lucidity. Recognizing patterns of abuse, setting healthy boundaries, and protecting your financial resources are all signs of a completely competent mind. In fact, I would say you are acting more rationally now than when you were allowing the financial abuse." She gave me an official report documenting my full mental competence, dated and sealed. It was my insurance policy against any future legal challenges. When I returned home, I found Fern working in her garden. She came over to the fence that separated our properties with a worried expression. "Evelina, an older woman, came by yesterday asking about you. She wanted to know if you had been acting strangely lately. I told her you seemed happier and more relaxed than ever. I told her about Regina's visit and her veiled threat." Fern listened with growing indignation. "That is unbelievable," she exclaimed. "Trying to have you declared incompetent for not wanting to give away your own money is the most absurd thing I have ever heard." "What bothers me the most," I said, "is that they truly believe they are entitled to my money. They do not see it as my estate. They see it as their inheritance already paid in advance." "You know what you need," Fern said with a mischievous smile. "You need to get out and enjoy your freedom. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" She was right. I had spent so many years living according to the needs and demands of others that I had completely forgotten what it felt like to do something simply for personal pleasure. "There is a 5-day cruise leaving next Wednesday." Fern continued. "I was supposed to go with my sister, but she had to cancel due to health issues. Would you like to come with me?" The idea thrilled me immediately. When was the last time I had traveled simply for pleasure? When had I slept in a bed that was not my own, eaten in a restaurant without calculating the cost, or simply relaxed without the constant anxiety of Travis's next financial crisis? "I would love to," I replied without hesitation. That very afternoon, we booked the cruise. $1,500 per person for 5 days, all inclusive. It was a fraction of what I had spent on Travis and Marla's last vacation, but this time it would be exclusively for my own enjoyment. Sunday morning, while I was figuring out what to pack for the cruise, the doorbell rang. It was Travis alone this time. He looked terrible, deep dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, and a desperate expression carved into his face. "Mom," he said with a broken voice, "please, we need to talk without Marla, without shouting, just you and me." I let him in, but I kept my emotional distance. I had already learned how to recognize when I was being manipulated. "Mom, I am desperate," he began, The car insurance is due on Monday, and I do not have the money to pay it. If I do not renew it, I cannot legally drive, and without a car, I cannot get to work. How much is the insurance? I asked. $250. And how much did you earn last month? $3,500. But what, Travis? But we have expenses, the rent, food, utilities, and what else do you spend money on? He was quiet for a moment. Mom, do you not understand living is expensive? Living is expensive when you have a lifestyle you cannot afford, I replied coldly. Tell me one thing, son. How much did you spend on restaurants last month? I do not know. Maybe. How much do you spend on streaming services, gym memberships, food delivery apps? That is different, Mom. Those are basic necessities. Streaming services are basic necessities. In the modern world, yes, you cannot live like a hermit. There was the fundamental problem. Travis genuinely believed that luxuries were necessities and that true necessities were someone else's responsibility. Travis, I said calmly, you are 35 years old. You have a college education. You have a job. Why can you not pay a $250 car insurance bill? Because there is no money left after everything else. Then cut back on everything else. It is not that easy. You cannot just cut expenses like that. Why not? Why? He became visibly frustrated. Because we have a life to maintain, a life you cannot afford, but you have always been there to help us. And there was the naked truth. He was not asking for temporary help. He was claiming what he considered his right. In his mind, I was a permanent part of his financial structure, not a mother who occasionally provided support. Travis, I said, I am going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Have you ever in these 10 years made a real budget and tried to live solely on your salary? He fell silent. Have you ever considered moving to a cheaper apartment? Silence again. Have you ever voluntarily cut back on expenses so you would not have to ask me for money? Mom, those are unfair questions. Unfair. It is unfair to ask a 35-year-old adult if he has tried to live within his means. You do not understand the pressure we are under. Marla has expectations. Her friends live a certain way. We cannot look poor. And when did you ever consider that my expectations and my financial pressure mattered? For the first time in the conversation, Travis was completely silent. I could see in his eyes that he was processing something he had never considered before. Mom, he finally said in a softer, trembling voice, I did not know you felt pressured. Really, you never wondered how I could afford your lifestyle while I ate beans and rice. You never once wondered why I never bought new clothes for myself, but always had money available for your endless emergencies. Tears began to roll slowly down his cheeks. I honestly thought you liked helping us. I believed it was your way of showing love. And it was Travis. But you turned my love into an obligation. You turned my generosity into an expectation. And finally, you turned my sacrifice into a reason for mockery. Mom, what Marla said. What she said was the straw that broke the camel's back, but the glass had been filling up drop by drop for years. Travis cried silently for several long minutes. When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded different, more mature, almost burdened with a new awareness. What can I do to fix this? You can start, I replied firmly, by paying for your own car insurance. Travis sat in my living room for almost an hour after our conversation. We did not talk much more, but I could see that something had shifted in his expression. For the first time in years, He seemed to be truly reflecting on his behavior instead of merely looking for ways to get what he wanted. When he finally left, he said, "Mom, I am going to find a way to pay for the insurance, and we are going to have a serious talk about our expenses." I did not completely believe him, but at least it sounded like a first step toward maturity. On Monday morning, as I was packing for my cruise on Wednesday, I received an unexpected call. It was Marla, but her tone was completely different from the sharp one she had used in the previous days. "Evelina," she said in a calm, careful voice, "I know things have been tense between us. Could we meet for coffee without Travis, without drama, just the two of us?" I agreed more out of curiosity than any hope of reconciliation. We met at a small coffee shop near the mall. Marla arrived dressed more simply than usual, without the expensive jewelry and designer clothes she normally wore. She looked tired, but also more humble. "Evelina," she began after we ordered our coffees, "I want to sincerely apologize for what I said last week. It was cruel, disrespectful, and completely inappropriate." "What made you change your mind?" I asked directly. "Honestly, the humiliation at the restaurant, but not just that. These past few days, I have had to face the reality of our finances without your support, and I realized something terrifying." "What was that?" "That we have no idea how to live within our means. We have been living for years as if we were rich because you financed the difference between our income and our expenses." It was the first time I had ever heard Marla offer an honest reflection on her financial situation. "Yesterday," she continued, "Travis and I sat down and made a real budget just with our salaries, without any outside help. Do you know what we discovered?" "Tell me." "That we spend almost double what we earn. Double, Evelina. Not just a little more, but double. And you always covered the difference." "And what are you going to do now?" "We are going to have to make drastic changes. The apartment where we live costs $1,200 a month. With our combined salaries, we should be paying $800 at most. We are going to have to move." "And is Travis on board with that?" "He resisted at first, but when he saw the numbers written clearly on paper, he had no choice. We are also going to have to cancel membership services and completely change the way we socialize." Marla paused to take a sip of her coffee. "Evelina, I want to ask you something, and please be honest with me. When did you start to resent our financial dependence?" The question surprised me with its directness. I think the resentment grew gradually, but it crystallized when I realized that you not only expected my help, but took it completely for granted. "When was that?" "When you stopped asking me for money and just started using it. When the additional cards became a normal thing. When my savings became your automatic emergency fund." Marla nodded with a look of shame. "You are right. At some point, we stopped seeing you as a person who was helping us and started seeing you as a resource." "Exactly." "Is there any way we can rebuild our relationship?" Marla asked me quietly. "I am going to be completely honest with you. The relationship we had before is gone. That relationship was based on an unsustainable dynamic where I gave endlessly and you only took. If we want to build something new, it has to be on completely different foundations." "What kind of foundations?" Marla asked cautiously. "Mutual respect, financial independence on your part, and a relationship where my value is not determined by my economic utility." Marla was silent for a long moment. "Does that mean you will never help us again?" "It means that if you ever need real help in a genuine emergency, after you have proven that you can live responsibly on your own, we could consider it. But it would be true help, not a permanent subsidy. How long would we have to prove our independence?" It is not a test with a deadline, Marla. It is a change of life. If you can maintain a balanced budget, live within your means, and build your own emergency savings, then you will have demonstrated real financial maturity. And your vacations, your outings to expensive restaurants, those are things you will have to earn with your own work, like most people do. Marla looked genuinely overwhelmed. Evelina, I am not sure we even know how to live like that. Then it is time you learn. You have education, jobs, and abilities. The only thing you have lacked is the motivation to be independent. And if we fail, then you will fail as responsible adults learning from your mistakes. But at least you will fail as masters of your own decisions, not depending on someone else to solve your problems. We finished our coffees in a thoughtful silence. As we got up to leave, Marla said to me, Evelina, I know this does not fix everything, but I want you to know that I have learned something important this week. What is that? That being an adult is not just about being of adult age. It is about taking on adult responsibility. And we have been playing at being adults while you carried the real responsibilities. It was the most mature reflection I had ever heard her make. That night, as I finished packing for my cruise, I felt strangely at peace. I had not lost a family. I had left behind a toxic dynamic that was hurting all of us. If Travis and Marla truly wanted to change, they would have to prove it with actions, not words. On Tuesday, I received a text message from Travis. Mom, I got a personal loan to pay for the car insurance. I also found a cheaper apartment. We are moving next month. I wanted you to know. It was not much, but it was something. A small step toward the independence they so desperately needed. That night I slept soundly, knowing that the next day I would begin my first truly personal adventure in decades. The cruise was a revelation. 5 days of waking up when I wanted, eating whatever I craved, and doing activities just because they brought me pleasure. Fern turned out to be the perfect travel companion, independent fun, and completely free of family drama. On the ship, I met other women my age who had been through similar painful experiences. During one dinner, a woman named Norma told me how her 3 adult children had drained her retirement fund before she finally said enough was enough. Another woman, Isabel, had discovered that her son was secretly using her credit card to gamble online. What surprised me the most, Isabel said, as we watched the sunset from the deck, was realizing that I was not the only one. I thought it was a problem unique to my family. But it turns out there is a whole generation of parents who do not know how to say no to our adult children. When I returned home on Sunday, I felt renewed. 5 full days without a single call, asking for money, without financial anxiety, without the constant burden of solving other people's problems. It was like remembering who I had been before I became the family bank. There were several messages on my answering machine, but to my surprise, none of them were a desperate demand for money. Travis had called twice simply to see if I had arrived home safely from the trip. Marla had left a short message. I hope you enjoyed your cruise. We would love to hear about your experience when you have time. On Monday morning, Fern came to visit carrying fresh coffee and a small box of pastries so she could hear every detail of my trip. As we chatted on my patio, I suddenly saw Travis's car parked quietly in my driveway. But this time, instead of getting out immediately and heading straight for my door, like before, he sat inside the car for several long minutes, as if gathering courage. When he finally rang the doorbell, his expression was noticeably different. He seemed nervous, uncertain, but also somehow more mature than I had seen in years. Mom, he said softly when I opened the door, I know you just got back from your trip, but could we please talk for a moment? I invited him in, and Fern discreetly excused herself, returning to her own house to give us privacy. "Mom, I wanted to tell you what we have been doing this week," Travis began. "Marla and I moved into a smaller apartment. We are paying $400 less in rent every single month." "How do you feel about the change?" I asked carefully. "Honestly, it was tough at first. The apartment is smaller. It is in a less fancy neighborhood, but after a few days, I realized something important." "What was that?" "That I can sleep peacefully, knowing that we are paying for everything with our own money. I do not have that constant anxiety of not knowing how we are going to cover next month's expenses." It was the very first time I had heard Travis talk about financial anxiety from his own perspective. It had never occurred to me that he might also have been silently stressed by the unsustainability of his lifestyle. We also canceled the expensive gym memberships and signed up for a basic one that costs a fifth of the price, he continued, and Marla found a part-time job on weekends to generate extra income. "Marla is working more?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, and it was her idea. She says she wants to contribute more actively to our finances instead of just managing money that comes from other places." I was genuinely surprised to hear that Marla herself had taken that initiative. "Mom, I also wanted to apologize formally," Travis said with sincerity, "not just for what happened 2 weeks ago, but for all these years. I never realized I was treating you like an ATM instead of as my mother." "What made you realize it?" "When we had to make our first real budget, I realized I had no idea how much it really cost to live. My entire adult life, I had been living beyond my means because you always covered the difference." Travis paused and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mom, I want you to know that these last few days have been the first in years where I truly feel like an adult, making my own decisions, solving my own problems, being responsible for my own consequences." "And how does that feel?" I asked quietly. "Terrifying, but also liberating. I did not know how much weight I was carrying until I got rid of it." Weight, the weight of knowing deep down that he was not truly independent, the weight of living a financial lie, the weight of realizing that his lifestyle had depended on exploiting his own mother's generosity. Those words hit me deeply. For years, I had thought I was the only one suffering in that toxic dynamic. But it turned out that Travis had also been carrying guilt and anxiety. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything that has happened, but there is something I would like to ask." "Tell me." "Do you think we can ever have a normal relationship? A relationship where I am your son who visits you because he loves you, not because he needs something?" The question moved me because it implied that he finally understood the difference. "Travis, that relationship can start today if you want it to. I have always wanted to have a son who visits me because he cares about me, not because I am useful." "So, would you like it if Marla and I came for lunch on Sunday? We will bring the food we will cook, and we will just spend time together. I would love that." After Travis left, I sat in my living room reflecting on everything that had changed in just 2 weeks. I had lost my role as my family's financial savior, but I had gained something far more valuable, my self-respect and the possibility of a genuine relationship with my son. That night, I called Mr. Gareth to ask about modifying my will again. After the conversation with Travis, I wanted to consider a different approach. Instead of punishing him permanently, I decided to create a will that rewarded maturity, demonstrated consistently over time. Mrs. Marsh, the lawyer said, you are thinking of a tiered will based on behavior. Exactly. If Travis demonstrates real financial independence for 2 consecutive years, he could receive a larger portion. If he continues that pattern for 5 years, another larger portion. But if Travis falls back into his old habits, then we revert to the original plan. It is an intelligent structure, one that incentivizes long-term personal growth instead of short-term convenience. As I hung up the phone, I realized that for the very first time in so many years, I was planning my future based on hope rather than fear. Hope that my son had truly learned and grown. Hope that our relationship could finally heal in a healthy way. Hope that my final years would be lived with dignity, respect, and a sense of freedom that I had denied myself for far too long. I walked out to my patio and looked up at the stars. In the distance, I heard the gentle sound of the fountain I had installed in my garden last year, a small luxury I had allowed myself only after years of doubting whether I deserved to spend that money on myself. Now I knew the truth. I had always deserved to treat myself with the same generosity I had so freely shown to others. It had taken me 68 years to finally learn that lesson, but I had learned it, and I would never forget it again. My story might remind some of the painful yet empowering journeys people share in Reddit revenge stories, but for me, it was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice, my boundaries, and my worth. As I sat there, I thought about how life has a way of teaching us lessons in the hardest, but also the most transformative ways. For decades, I confused sacrifice with love, believing that giving endlessly was the only way to keep my family close. But I now understand that real love cannot exist without respect, and respect cannot exist when one side is drained while the other only takes. This experience taught me that boundaries are not walls. They are bridges to healthier relationships. By saying no, I was not rejecting my family. I was giving them the chance to grow up, to take responsibility, and to stand on their own 2 feet. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have continued sacrificing in silence, or would you have taken the same step to protect yourself? I truly want to hear your reflections, so please share your thoughts and personal experiences in the comments below. I am always eager to listen and learn from others, and if my journey resonated with you, I would deeply appreciate your support. Do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I invite you to watch the next video recommended on your screen. It is a story I am very proud of, and I believe you will find it just as meaningful. Thank you sincerely for supporting me, for walking through these stories with me, and for helping keep this space alive. I will see you again soon with another chapter. Until then, take care of yourselves and never forget the value of your own dignity.